It's another week of college football. That's Matt Lane. I'm Tucker Franklin. We're here to break it all down with you here on this week's Barely Bowl Eligible.
This is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
We are barely bowl eligible here on KC Sports Network. As I mentioned earlier, I'm Tucker Franklin. That's Matty Lane. We're here talking college ball. Fridays are for college ball, Matthew. How are you doing? How have things been?
We're doing good. We're getting down to the stretch run here of college football. We got a lot of not quite there, but hey, out here we got the big rivalry. We got Tar Heels, Blue Devils coming up this week, coming up tomorrow. So we're getting to rivalry games. We're getting to the fun stuff in college football now. We're starting to get down to who's going to play in the conference championships, finding out answers for the college football playoff and bowl games. This is a fun time of year as a college football fan. It's good on good almost every single week. You're no longer getting the blowouts, the stinkers for the most part. So this is an exciting time. This is the time we all wait for.
Unless you're Georgia or Alabama, you're not going to get a blowout. Because I think Georgia still plays Georgia Tech.
It's a rivalry game.
It is. It's technically a rivalry game. Is it going to be close? No. Alabama still has Auburn. That game won't be close.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's still some potential for close, but only 3 games left, Matty, in this college football season. It feels like we just started talking college ball not too long ago, but now we're down to 3 games left before bowl season officially starts. Seems crazy. We got the second week of the college football playoff rankings out. Nothing changed in the top 6. And that's really what we care about is the top 6. There's some shuffling going on underneath, and that has maybe some New Year's 6 bowl implications. But other than that, not a whole lot going on in the college football playoff rankings.
Bama gets to play Chattanooga still too.
Okay. See, I knew that they had another cupcake besides Auburn. I knew that they had another one worked in there as well because Georgia and Alabama both did that. So it seems like we're hurling until the inevitable Georgia-Alabama conference championship game. And Maddie, that kind of takes us into what we want to talk about before we get into this week's watch schedule. Is kind of looking ahead to the conference championships, like what's on the line for some of these teams heading up here, and kind of some predictions of who we think is going to be in the conference championships. So Maddie, you want to start with the ACC?
Oh, the ACC, sure. Yeah, I think that one's probably the most straightforward at this point in time, right? Florida State is undefeated on the year, undefeated in the ACC. Louisville has 1 loss on the year. It's 1 loss in the ACC. It's to the Pittsburgh Panthers somehow, but alas, Louisville is all but locked this up. I think the only way they don't play in it now is if they drop their last 2. I think they have to drop their last 2 games, and Boston College or Georgia Tech have to win out, I think, is the only route we get. I guess North Carolina or Duke is still involved too, potentially. I don't know. But Louisville's almost got this locked up. I would be surprised if it's not Florida State, Louisville. Is that where your head's at right now?
Yeah, I think so. You and I were watching that Louisville game last night thinking that, hey, the UVA, the Who's were going to throw a little upset in there, throw a little wrinkle in it, but Louisville was able to pull it out. When they wore glow-in-the-dark uniforms when the lights were on, that was interesting to me, that they were like, oh, yeah, look at these sick glow-in-the-dark uniforms. And I was like, that's cool. There's lights on when you play football, so I don't know how that's really going to work. But no, shout out Louisville for getting that win. But I do think that that's how it's going to work out. I think there is ways that North Carolina can get in there still, but they need help. I think anybody else outside of Louisville needs help from Louisville.
Quickly, touch on it. Louisville's last 2 games are Miami and Kentucky. So technically losable games, right? I don't know how all the tiebreakers will play out. If say North Carolina specifically ends up with the same record as Louisville. So if Louisville only drops one of those games, North Carolina wins out. I don't know how the tiebreakers will flush out for them. I think you got to start looking through common opponents to dig it out. And I don't know how that'll play out, but so, there is a chance for some ties there with Louisville. Florida State is all but locked in. I think as long as they win one of their last 3 games, they are going to the ACC championship based on tiebreakers and everything. So they're all but locked in. Louisville doesn't have the easiest 2 games. Miami can beat people. Kentucky is, an SEC team. So there's a chance, a small chance that Louisville doesn't make it. I'm still on board for the let's get Boston College to the ACC championship game just to sacrifice them to Florida State, because like who wouldn't want to watch Boston College Florida State rematch in the ACC championship game?
That's fair. And it seems like I just looked ahead to Florida State's schedule as well. They still have Miami and Florida on their schedule, like two teams. Florida's
one real team.
They have one real team, and then they have North Alabama. So they pulled the old Nick Saban, the old Kirby Smart, and scheduling their cupcake late in the season as well. So Florida State looking like they will be in it as well. Listen, it's whoever wins, whoever gets that second place in the ACC is going to be sacrificed to Florida State, in my opinion, because they're rolling. They look good. But Maddie, you ready to move on to the Big 12?
Yeah. Ooh, Big 12. Yeah, that's another fun one.
The Big 12 is a wild conference, and it's got some even wilder standings as you look at it right now. Texas in first place as we sit here, 5-1 in the conference, 8-1 overall. I don't think that would have surprised us in August if I would have told you that, Maddie. But the number 2 team right now in the conference, with tiebreakers over the team that currently sits in third, all the teams tied for third actually, is Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State in Texas would be the Big 12 championship if it ended
hottest team
today.
in the Big 12. 5-game win streak.
Yeah.
Do you know who is tied for scoring the most points in Big 12 conference play? Oklahoma State. Listen, here we are.
So
We're at the point. Oklahoma State spent their entire non-con schedule trying to figure out how they were going to make a 3 QB system work. And they decided that's probably a bad idea. Let's just pick a guy. And lo and behold, they have ripped off wins against the 4-2 in conference play Kansas Jayhawks, Kansas State Wildcats, and Oklahoma Sooners. And this is where it is. This is the fun part. I think we all assume Texas is playing in the conference championship game. They do have right now like a 1-game cushion over the Jayhawks and over the Wildcats. They don't, I guess if they tie with Oklahoma, they lose that tiebreaker, right? But they have the tiebreaker over both Kansas-based teams. But Oklahoma State, they have, not only do they have every tiebreaker, they play 3 new Big 12 teams for the remaining schedule. They are at UCF. They are at Houston. They have BYU at home. Those are 3 incredibly winnable games. New Big 12 teams haven't beat a single vintage Big 12 team yet. They've only beat each other. They've only beat each other. Wait, hold on. Did BYU or Houston? Did BYU or Houston pick up a win? Okay, sorry, I take that back. BYU beat West Virginia last week. I think that was the first win of a new Big 12 team versus a traditional Big 12 team. So it's just, fun times. Fun times.
Yes.
Oh, they got 2 wins. They got 2 wins last week. They got Baylor in there too.
Baylor. Baylor. Not a good football team. They go to Kansas State this week. But if you look at the bottom half of the Big 12 with TCU, Houston, BYU, Baylor, UCF, and Cincinnati is winless in the Big 12 since they came over. But Maddie, that's a really good point because with there being no divisions in pretty much all of these except the SEC, I think.
Big 10, baby.
Oh, Big 10. Big 10 has divisions as well. They don't count. They don't matter. It's really interesting when you look at Texas and Oklahoma State are tied, right? Technically tied. I think maybe Texas has the tiebreaker, right? Is that how it works? Or do you take win percentage or overall record after it? I think each conference does it differently, but
yeah, I don't know if it's overall win record or if they're going common opponents next, right? I don't know what is next. Did Texas play Iowa State yet? Maybe that is it's got to be overall record. It's my guess. I don't know right now, just judging by the standings.
Yeah, Texas left on their schedule is TCU this week, Iowa State, and Texas Tech. So they don't have the toughest schedule remaining either. And I think Quinn is coming back for the Iowa State game this week.
So much orange.
Reported. There's a lot of orange going on. And there's going to be a lot of orange in old Dallas, Texas Arlington, Texas, excuse me, when they take on it at old Jerry World at the Big 12 Championship. I was thinking today, hey, you know what? I went to the Big 12 Championship last year. Maybe I'll sneak down there again. Dallas isn't too bad of a drive, right? You can do it in a morning if you wake up early enough. It'd be fine and go down there, go to the game, come back, ready for the Chiefs game. I don't know about Texas.
Boy, how happy would the Big 12 be if Mike Gundy sends OU and Texas off with losses and they're finally in the Big 12?
Incredible. Manny, we could breeze past this one. The Big Ten. I don't know if I really want to talk about the Big Ten West and waste energy talking about the Big Ten West.
Okay, the conference championship game for this one's really interesting to me, though, right? Like, because it happens on November 25th when Ohio State and Michigan face off. That's when we determine the winner of the Big Ten. We find out actually a week earlier than every other conference. Like, that's fun. True. We get that early one on that. So, I mean, yeah, it's Michigan over the next 2 or 3 weeks. They play Penn State and Ohio State. You assume, the way Michigan's look, we're going to talk about them in that Penn State matchup, but like you're getting one of those 3 teams beating the absolute breaks off of like one of 8 Big 12 West teams that are still like technically can win that conference, right? I think anybody can still win it besides Purdue. I think Purdue's the only team out of it.
The Sickos Committee tweeted something out that I think that they can have I think there's still an all-way tie for the Big Ten West still in play, with 3 games remaining. It sucks. It's bad. Nebraska is in it.
Yeah. Purdue could definitely. Yeah, okay, you are correct. Purdue wins their last 3 games. Iowa loses out. Like, you could definitely, I think, get every team to 3 and 5 in the big. Oh my goodness.
It's gross. It's gross football. It is also very funny that I assume when the Pac-12 teams come over that they're going to be added to the Big Ten West. Is that what's going to happen? Or are they getting rid of divisions?
Rid of it. I think they're getting rid of the 2 divisions.
Thank God. They needed to do that years ago. But Iowa has left Rutgers at home, Illinois at home, and Nebraska on the road.
Losable. Because every game decided by 4 points or less.
Rutgers is like actually decent.
Rutgers is like what Iowa aspires to be. They play good defense and they can run the football. And like Iowa can only do one of those things right now.
Yeah. But
you're right. I'm excited to watch that game. I legitimately am excited to watch that game. I can't wait to watch Rutgers, who like I have like low key kind of been rooting for this year just because they are a fun team. They're 6-3. It's Rutgers. They have a chance to be 7-3 going into their final 2 weeks. I think that Rutgers is a solid football team this year. So like that's a fun game this week that I don't think we're going to talk about for the rest of the way. So
right, honorable mention. You gave you an honorable mention. It's not our Sickos game because we can't have too many Iowa games as Sickos games because Iowa fans, you already know that you're Sickos, right, by watching that team. But Maddie, let's move on to the Pac-12. There's a pretty big game in the Pac-12 this week in terms of. There's a few big games when it comes to playoff, not necessarily playoff, but their conference championship implications. Washington leads the way right now with Oregon just behind them. Maddie, we'll probably have a conversation a little bit later about Oregon, but thoughts on this one? Do you think that it's just going to be Washington, Oregon again in the Pac-12 championship?
Washington winning, I think, locks them into the championship game. I believe they would if they win this week, the only teams that could tie them, they would have beaten already. So they would be kind of locked in. So yeah, that's a big game for them against the Utes. Again, another one I think we'll talk about later. Yeah. USC, huge game. USC, everyone's kind of down on them because they've lost some games, but people forget Notre Dame was out of conference. They only have 2 conference losses right now. So if they strap up right now and win out, they would hold the tiebreaker over Oregon. They would get to play the Huskies, presumably, assuming the Huskies win this weekend or just like even one more game. So like, USC's playing for a lot right now, and that's probably why it made the watch list. So this seems like a 3-team race right now. It would be fun if Oregon State didn't, lose a couple games that they shouldn't have lost most likely. The Arizona Wildcats, the Fighting Jed Fishes, playing well, outside shot, but they're still alive. Utah technically still alive. And I think that's about it for this conference right now.
Yeah, I think so. Washington, the games they have left, they host Utah this week. They go to Oregon State, and then they host the Apple Cup.
Yes.
They're the home team in the Apple Cup as well. Oregon, their remaining schedule, they host USC this week. They go to Arizona State, and then they host Oregon State.
So yeah, if Washington gets to 7 wins, so if they win any one of those games, I believe that they will go in because Oregon or USC will have to lose this week. I don't think that either one of them Oh no, technically they could both. So, or Washington technically has to win 2 out of their last 3 to make it to the Pac-12 championship. Sorry, I was a little off there.
I mean, they still got good chances to get in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean I think that was pretty straightforward. The SEC I think is also pretty straightforward when you look at it. Big game this week with Alabama or Ole Miss and Georgia. That's a pretty big game in terms of it, but Georgia all but has secured the SEC East. Now, it's interesting if Tennessee
right?
No, Tennessee could still win it if Tennessee beats Missouri, and then Tennessee still plays Georgia.
They play next week, yeah.
Yeah, and then I think Georgia would have to lose another game after that, but because then Tennessee would have the tiebreaker over them. But it's a big game this week for both Tennessee and Missouri when it comes to that game. But just in terms of the SEC East, Tennessee could still win it. Missouri can't win it anymore because of the losing the head-to-head to Georgia. Alabama, Ole Miss is going to be an interesting one if they can kind of make some noise there. Have they already played each other?
Yes, Alabama won.
Yes, that's right. Okay, yeah, Ole Miss didn't look very good in that game. That's right. I remember that game now. But Mississippi has Georgia. They go to Georgia, then they play Louisiana Monroe, and then they go to Mississippi State. But Alabama, as we already mentioned, should be able to kind of cruise to a pole position in the SEC when they go to Kentucky tomorrow.
Yes,
and then they host Chattanooga. Then they go to Auburn. All 3 games very winnable. All 3 games very blowoutable, I should say.
Yeah, if Bama wins one of their last 2 SEC games, either Auburn or Kentucky, they are locked in from the West. Or if Ole Miss loses a game, Alabama gets locked in from the West. So the most likely you are going to see Bama and probably versus Georgia, right? Georgia would have to lose both of their final remaining SEC games, which are, who did we say they were playing? They play in Ole Miss and Tennessee. I guess not the easiest road for them, right?
They really don't. No, and then Georgia Tech.
Easiest road. Yeah. Right. So we don't even care about the Tech game though for the SEC, right? Like we're just, so we're most likely looking at Alabama, Georgia, just like we all thought last year at this time. And buddy, my Alabama's going to win every game by 1 score and ride themselves into a victory over Georgia in the SEC championship game and get into the playoff is alive and well. And I am here for it.
Then we're going to be talking about SEC needing 2 teams in the college football playoff.
Goodness,
it's only a matter of time, Matty. You know it is. But you've been pioneering. You've been leading that charge in terms of. But let's go ahead and get into the watch schedule. There's some big games this week, as we alluded to, and the biggest game of them all. Yeah, I think it's the biggest game of them all. Michigan travels to University Park, Pennsylvania, to Happy Valley to take on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Matty, do you know if this is a whiteout game?
It is not. It's a stripe out game. They are doing the stripes. And I don't dislike a stripe game or a checkerboard game or whatever. Yeah. I don't dislike it, but I'm a big whiteout fan. Right. And so I don't know if I like the stripes. I don't know if I'm feeling the stripes for this. I think you go whiteout or you go home.
Yeah, I agree. Especially because this is a huge game. In terms of college football playoff rankings, Penn State can do themselves a whole lot if they win this game. In terms of the Big Ten standings, it's pretty much Ohio State, right? Because Ohio State has the tiebreaker over Penn State. So I don't even know. Can Penn State even make it to the Big Ten championship game?
If they win out and then Michigan beats Ohio State.
But does Ohio State lose this week too, though?
No, they would all. I don't know how that would work. So it would be a 3-way tie, and they would all have wins over one another. I don't know what the final resolution there is. I legitimately don't. If they all end with the exact same record, it would be great. That's so. I mean, we're kind of rooting for it, but I'm Team Michigan. I think the crybaby Big Ten head coaches need to get their little tears sucked back in, get over the sign stealing. Purdue, Ohio State, all these other teams that are colluding against Michigan were doing a better job than whatever Stallions' little minions were doing, recording stuff on a cell phone. You're telling me that you didn't trust Ohio State staff to get their signals on the sideline and send it to you? Isn't it better than some dude named Joe recording it from the 88th row on his cell phone? You're gonna trust that guy more than Ohio State's coaching staff to give you the signals? No. Other teams were doing what Michigan did better, just Michigan went about it in a bad way because everybody hates them because of how they have presented themselves for the past 50 years. So I don't care about your sign stealing nonsense. I hope Michigan absolutely destroys Penn State, rolls into Columbus, runs through Ohio State again, and heads off to the college football playoff undefeated, looking like the best team. And honestly, they might be the best team in college football.
They really might be. And I think that's a conversation when we talk about resumes. Resumes is such like a big thing for the college football playoff committee. That's why Ohio State is number one, because like what they've done, right? Like they've beaten a couple pretty good teams. And going to Notre Dame and beating Notre Dame was a pretty big one for the committee, beating Penn State as well. Michigan doesn't have that good of a resume. They beat everybody by a lot, but they haven't really played anyone that's been too
the Scarlet Knights slander.
I know I'm slandering the Scarlet Knights. But when you look at this game, this was the one game. I remember we were doing the Big Ten preview with Matt Miller, him and I were, and we were talking about this like, hey, like this is the one game that Michigan has that's going to be a resume builder for them. Like this is the one. Like if they drop it, their resume looks not as good anymore. So they probably fall out of favor with the committee a little bit. So I think that's going to be really interesting. Michigan favored by 4.5 points in this game. A lot of really good players in this game, Maddie, that people should have their eyes on.
Yeah. It's like, here's the trick. Like we haven't talked much about the Michigan like team because they've played nobody, right? So we haven't got to really dive deep into the players. So like I could just read off their entire depth chart and we could talk about every single player on it. But I think if you're going to start looking for guys to watch, first of all, let's start with this. JJ McCarthy isn't the JJ McCarthy that everybody remembers, I think, even from last year or as a freshman when he was working in. Like, he's good. He's actively a good player. They haven't played anybody worth focusing on yet, like, right? So we don't know how well he's been challenged. He had a bad game, I think, against Bowling Green early in the year where it seemed like he was testing some stuff out. But since then, he's been nails. So, like, this is a big game not only for Michigan, but for JJ McCarthy. He wins this game and looks good. He comes out of here as the Heisman favorite, even over Michael Penix. Like, I think it's that big of a game for him. So he's, just an eye on wide receiver Roman Wilson for Michigan is going to be going up against Penn State's corner Kalen King. Kalen King got embarrassed versus Ohio State. Marvin Harrison had his way with him. And it wasn't just Marvin Harrison. Julian Fleming, another Ohio State receiver, had a lot of good plays against Kalen King. And King entered the year as a round one hopeful at the corner spot. So he wants to get it back. Roman Wilson, number one for Michigan, has been very good this year. So like that'll be a fun matchup worth looking at. I think Michigan will push around Penn State a little bit on both trenches, but Penn State's defense is good. So it might come down to that. And I mean, take a dart, lob it at the Michigan defense, and you're probably hitting a draftable player. They might be the Georgia defense of last year, like just the guys that they have at all the different levels that are going to play in the NFL. So like you can't highlight a singular person, just look everywhere on their defense and you're going to find an NFL player.
Yeah, their defense is really good. But what I think is most impressive about Michigan, they won like I can't remember what's the award for the offensive line? Joe Moore Award?
Joe Moore. Yeah.
Cool. Look at that. Nailed that. They've won that like the last 2 years and they lost a ton of people from that offensive line, and they restocked. And
guess what? They're going to win it again. They're going to win it again. They're going to win it again this year.
It's incredible. You look at with their line, and that was something that Matt Miller and I talked about. I really think this is the first time we've talked about Michigan all year, Maddie. Now that I think about it, like
they've played nobody, right? And like you forget how good some of these guys are. Most people haven't watched Michigan like closely yet to see like prospects. Like nobody knows Ladarius Henderson. Like he was a transfer. He came in, he transferred in. Nobody's watched him and get challenged yet because they've played nobody. So here's this guy coming. I believe it was from Arizona State, one of the better tackles in the transfer portal. He's coming in and he's playing well. Like just nobody knows these guys. Chris Jenkins is a potential round one defensive tackle for this team. Chris Jenkins, that might sound familiar. He's the son of former football player Chris Jenkins. So like they have guys everywhere. And so, we just haven't talked about Michigan at all yet this year. And here they are playing Penn State.
Right. They've got a couple grad transfers on that offensive line too. And they have a transfer for both of those grad transfers are from Stanford, actually. Interesting enough. And AJ Barner is from Indiana. So an intra-conference transfer. And they've got a really good offensive line. That's one of the things that's been so good about them. But you're right, Maddie. When you look at that defense is just as like it's incredible when you look at all the prospects that they have. they were really able to. They're a pretty old team when you look at like the roster. They've got a lot of like graduates. They got a lot of seniors. They got a lot of transfers on this team as well. But they're a pretty old team when it comes to that. And I'm curious to see how that translates to a game like this. I'm sure that you're gonna know the magnitude. I think there's been some reports out there about potential punishment coming down from the Big Ten prior to this game. About Jim Harbaugh, that would be wild to me, truthfully, if the Big Ten chose to do that. But this game is going to be full of players playing on Sundays, which is a very exciting thing to see.
We're going into the picks. I have a fun stat for you. Has nothing to do with betting, but I got a fun stat for you. Did you know that a single offense playing Michigan has not taken a snap inside the red zone yet? The touchdowns they've given up have been explosive plays. They have not given up. Maybe red zone, maybe 10-yard line. It's one of the two. Somebody might have snuck inside the 20, but for sure, no one has taken a snap inside the 10. And I think it was the red zone as of 2 weeks ago. They aren't allowing people to move down the field. The scores against them have been long plays. You know who really struggles at long plays? Penn State. They are very much a move the ball slowly down the field. So I'm taking Michigan. I'm laying the points. I didn't care what the line was in this game. The Penn State that I saw play Ohio State, who I don't think is as physical on defense or offense as Michigan is, has no chance to beat this team. They would have to be significantly better than the team I watched play Ohio State. Give me Michigan laying the points for sure. I don't see how Penn State tries to run the ball and throw 3-yard passes down the field because they're not hitting explosives. And no team is taking a snap inside the 10-yard line, potentially the red zone versus Michigan.
That's insane. You like shook me with that. It's week 11, Matthew. It is week 11 in the college football season. Like, they've played 9 games at this point.
Yeah.
Well, to kind of piggyback off of what you were saying with Penn State, the Penn State team that you've seen play Ohio State, the favorite in Penn State's games have covered the spread in 13 of their last 14 games. I believe Ohio State did cover in that game, and I believe Ohio State was favored, even though they were on the road, which is an interesting stat, courtesy of our friends at DraftKings Sportsbook. But yeah, I'm with you, Maddie. I think Michigan's good. Like, I think hot take, everybody, hang on, hot take alert. I think Michigan's good, and I think they're going to show how good they are here. At this 11 a.m. kickoff, the eyes will be on them, especially with all the attention they've been getting in the media recently. They're gonna. I'm
sorry, my stat got broken last week as Purdue did get inside the 10 for one play. They got tackled at the 1 and had a 1-yard touchdown run from the 1. That was the first time a team had got inside Michigan's 10-yard line was Purdue last week at the 1-yard line.
Okay, so we can amend the stat and say there's been one play, a singular play in 11 weeks of football to be run in Michigan's territory. That's wild. Oh,
please hold. That could be wrong. That was the game recap from last year's Purdue Michigan game. That wasn't even this year's. You can continue on. We might still be alive. I'm going to go figure this out now.
Go figure it out. I'm going to give a shout out to a couple comments here. Christian Gumminger says, feels like Michigan hasn't really been in the news at all. Yeah, I know. Weird. And Zach Eisen, Mr. Robinson back is what he says. For that matchup. Okay, let's move on to the next game that we have on here. 2:30 Central kickoff time, 3:30 Eastern. Number 18 Utah travels to Seattle to take on the Washington Huskies, favored by 8.5 points. Washington is at home. This game will be on Fox. Just leave your TV on after Michigan Penn State. It's going to roll right into Utah Washington. Matthew, first thoughts on this game as Utah continues to do Utah things with a backup third string, fourth, who knows how far down the depth chart quarterback that they've got at this point, in an offense that is seemingly keeping their head above water with the defense. It's seemingly pretty good.
Well, first thing, my research department is telling me that Purdue did not get inside the 10-yard line.
We're alive.
Michigan. They got inside the red zone twice, but never the 10. Never the 10. So we are alive. They have not let a team inside their own 10-yard line. That's insanity. Yeah, Washington, Utah. This is a matchup that would have looked a lot more fun if we didn't just see Utah get blown, just completely have their get blown out by Oregon. Like this matchup would have a little bit more juice. Or if it was in Utah, if it was a home game for Utah at Rice-Eccles, it would have a little bit more bite. As it stands, Utah doesn't travel very well. That defense doesn't play quite as good on the road. You have zero trust in an offense that's averaging like 20 points on the road this year for the Utes to go into any Power 5 stadium. Even if Washington's defense is a little sketchy, we have zero faith that they'll be able to go in there and put up points. So it really just becomes, if Washington's offense can, operate at 75% capacity, 60%, they probably win this game comfortably just because of where Utah is with the injuries across the board to this team. But I got to put it in here. You never know when you're going to get a Kyle Whittingham special. It usually doesn't happen on the road, right? It usually doesn't happen on the road, but you can't ever rule out the Utes just coming in, biting kneecaps, as Dan Campbell would like to say, and fight the Huskies.
They might. Looking at the DraftKings Sportsbook line, it's moved down to 8, not 8.5 anymore in favor of Washington. So a half-point line movement there in favor of the Utes. But I'm with you. The offense of Washington is just incredibly fun. The wide receivers they have are incredibly fun to watch as well. I just don't know how Utah can hang, basically, is what it's going to be. Utah's got to be able to hang with them and go point for point, and I just don't know if they can do that.
Yeah. It's very difficult. And you look at this Utah team, it's, good defense. They play hard, right? But I wouldn't say the strength of this team is necessarily their coverage unit right now. They don't have, they don't have the best of cornerbacks last year. They lost a couple guys over the past couple seasons. You're going up against a passing attack that is going to do a lot of damage against you. So while I do like Cole Bishop there at safety, he's one of the better safeties in all of college football. He can't shut down everybody at once, right? They've got the safety running back plays both ways now. He's probably a better running back. Was it Vaki? He's probably a better running back than he has been safety, but he's fine. They're fine. They have a good Utah secondary, but not one that's going to shut down multiple top 50 picks. Potentially McMillan might even be back for this game. There is another one. The one matchup, though, that I really have my eyes on, Jonah Ellis, a defensive end wearing number 83 for Utah, going up against both Washington tackles, Rosengarten's, on the right side. And these guys, these Washington tackles are both good. They're both going to go to the NFL. And that's just a matchup. Jonah Ellis kind of really made life difficult for teams early in the season. I think Oregon handled him well. He had a good game against USC, but going up there against Fontenot and Rosengarten for Washington, if he doesn't have a big game, I just struggle to see how Utah slows down this Huskies' passing attack.
Jalen McMillan questionable for this game. That was early on.
Questionable for 9 weeks.
He's been questionable for a long time. Plus 160 at our friends at DraftKings Sportsbook have him scored a touchdown. So that tells you what DraftKings Sportsbook feels about McMillan.
Hey, if he's gonna play, you just throw that down. That's how. For this Washington offense, if their 3 wide receivers are playing, you bet on them to score. So hey, if you think he's gonna play, just throw it.
Yeah, they sling that ball around. It's incredibly fun to watch. Just as I mentioned earlier, but Maddie, 8-point favorites for the Huskies. 7 of Washington's last 8 games against top 15 AP ranked teams at Husky Stadium have gone over the total points line. That game's at 49.5. I do expect there to be a lot of points in this game. Average points per game at Husky Stadium, 62. So that's your average point total for this one. And Washington has covered the spread in each of its last 4 games in November. Against the spread this season, Utah 5-3-1. They've been pretty good against the spread. UW 4 of 5. Who's your pick here, Maddie?
So Utah can put up points, right? They can put up points relatively well against bad defenses. We saw them essentially just outscore USC with the backup quarterback. We saw them put up points on Arizona State, on Cal. They can put up points. The thing is, all those games I mentioned besides the USC one were at home. They put up points at home. On the road, it gets a lot dicier for them. I don't trust this team, even against Washington's defense, to go up and just be able to trade blow for blow. So I'm taking Washington with this line being what it is because it is in Seattle. If it was in Utah, I'd still think Washington would probably win, but I would see a nail biter. I don't think this one's that close. I don't know if it's a 35-6 complete blowout, but I don't think it is a even a close to a 1-score game. I think Washington wins this one pretty comfortably.
Yeah, I think so too, especially with it being on the road. That's kind of a big one for me. If it was at Rice Eccles, I think we'd have a little bit different of a conversation. And I think if it's at home, Utah does cover the 8.5, but I'm going to take Washington at home and covering the 8 points. We have 8.5 on the sheet right now. DraftKings is at 8, and I'll take the 8. And probably the 8.5 as well. But let's move on to the night game. It's a big one. This is where College Game Day is, I believe, is at number 9. Ole Miss travels to Athens, Georgia, to take on the number 2 ranked Georgia Bulldogs. This game is on ESPN. Matthew, first thoughts on this one?
It's a big challenge for Ole Miss. The last time they had one of these, it was against Bama. Lane Kiffin did a little bit of talking, and it looked really good for about 5 minutes. And then that team just got shut down by Alabama's defense. And late in the game, Dallas Turner completely took over. That was also the last time it felt like Ole Miss's defense played relatively well. So, that's the question, right? Is can Ole Miss's defense work themselves into a couple stops to allow their offense just to go completely bonkers and somehow outscore a Georgia defense that is a little bit gettable this year, right? We're coming off watching Missouri and Georgia, and Georgia was the better team, and they played really good. They made things hard for Missouri, but I don't think anybody left that game thinking, oh, wow, this is Georgia's defense of 2022 or 2021 that you're just not going to be able to do anything against. Very good, but they're not going to completely stifle everything. So can Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss scheme up enough stuff to put pressure on a Georgia offense to match pace? And what we have seen from Georgia's offense this year, I think they can. That is something they have in the back pocket this year that they maybe haven't had every single season before. But there's a lot of pressure on Ole Miss to get everything clicking. Right. A lot has to go right for them, I think, to really compete in this one.
I think so too. And that last point there is kind of the big one, is where I think this game probably means more to Ole Miss than it does Georgia, right? And I think that there's more at stake for Ole Miss than there is Georgia. Now, I'm not saying that Georgia's going to take this game lightly, but there's a bit more implications possibly for Ole Miss in this game rather than Georgia. And, Georgia coming off of a game where they didn't play perfect against Missouri. They played pretty good. They didn't play perfect. Ladd McConkey's really come on and really asserted some dominance, you could say, in the receiving game after Brock Bowers went down. He's been playing well. And he played well against Missouri as well. So I assume Georgia's going to be cooking on that end of it as well. They got a really solid defense. So, I mean, there's a reason they're number 2, should be probably number 1. That's a conversation we can have in terms of the college football playoff rankings and everything like that. Number 1 in the AP poll. The media thinks that they're the number 1 team. The committee, not quite sold on them yet, but back-to-back national championships have lost 1 game in the last 2 years or something like that. Have a 26-game home winning streak. I don't think that ends against Ole Miss. But listen, Lane's got those guys moving in the right direction. They've been playing well. They got a good win over LSU early on in the season. Didn't quite respond the way that you probably want them to against Alabama. They've had some tough road games this year, Maddie. I think they were at LSU. They were at Alabama. Now they're going to Georgia. Ole Miss has had some tough road tests.
They have, and they played a lot of one-score games too in these situations, right? They played a lot of close games. They've come out on top of them, but they definitely got all of their hard games on the road. So that makes it a little tricky to come up with some wins. I guess to injury news for Ole Miss here, right? Trey Harris is back. He's been their best wide receiver, probably their best player overall. He has been back the past couple weeks. He has been phenomenal. He's a wide receiver. He was a transfer in from Louisiana Tech. Think Jonathan Mingo from last year, only probably a little better. So he's back and playing. And then Caden Prexorn, tight end. He's been healthier. He's been playing a little bit more as the year's gone on. So those guys are good. Problem is they lost their starting right tackle to an injury this week. He foot injury, broken foot or something. Him being out is not ideal for a team that's probably going to try to mimic what Missouri did, which was get the ball out on the edges a lot. And if you're missing a starting right tackle, having to replace him with a backup when you're trying to really push the ball outside, that's not ideal. So it's just something to keep an eye on for that Georgia kind of defense to maybe get a few answers to. But then, like I said, Trey Harris, keep your eye on that wide receiver. Him versus Kamari Lassiter, cornerback for Georgia. Good ball player. Shut down Xavier Legette when they played earlier this year when they got matched up. Did an incredible job against Theo Weiss there on the outside versus Missouri. Lassiter's a good football player, so him and Trey Harris should go back and forth quite a bit.
Lassiter did really well against Luther Burden too. He had a couple 2 big press breakups on Luther. Now Luther did get hurt in that game in I think the second quarter, so take it with a grain of salt and everything like that. He still came back and played, I think, a decent amount of snaps. But I was very impressed with Lassiter after I watched that game. I was like, holy cow, this dude's fun to watch. And he a lot of times too, like if he did get beat, his recoveries were incredible in terms of getting back and then getting a pass defense out of it. But he didn't get.
I would say he's a little thin, and this is where I think Trey Harris might be able to get him. Trey Harris is going to have 30 pounds on him, and he's a very physical player. So, like, I just think that might be the one spot where you maybe see him be able to get over on Lassiter in a spot where I don't take this is coming at him, but he's a lot more physical than Luther Burden is, right? So, like, if you want to say this is a better matchup for Trey Harris than it was Burden, I think this would be the kind of spot.
There's different types of receiver.
Yeah,
him and Luther are. All right. 10-point spread. I believe we had it down at 10.5 in the sheet, Maddie, and then we had another late line movement here as we're we're live here.
It was 11. I think it might have even started higher than 11, and I know we've at least gotten down to 10 as of a second ago. Did it move again since then?
It's down at 10 right now. I'm going to look at the trend here. Yeah, it was all the way at 13 last week in favor of Georgia, and it's moved all the way down to 10. So it's kind of bounced between 10.5 and 10. I think it was 11, 10.5. Now it's down to 10. So 10 points in favor of the Georgia Bulldogs. Looking at the stats here from DraftKings Sportsbook, the 10th ranked team in the AP poll has failed to cover the spread in each of its last 6 games. Maddie, Ole Miss, number 10th team in the AP poll. So they failed to spread. Georgia at -10 there. Looking at the against the spread numbers for these teams, Ole Miss 5-2-1. Georgia 3-6. Georgia's not been very good against the spread this year. They failed to cover last week against Missouri. That's a pretty big spread. 15.5 was a pretty big spread for that game. Maddie, what do you think about the spread in this one?
Man, this is tight, right? Like, this is a tough one. This is about what if it was back up at 13, I feel a little bit better about taking Ole Miss. Coming down to 10, like, it's hard to see Ole Miss with the struggles on defense that we're talking about, thinking they're going to keep it that close. You're dealing with an injury to an offensive tackle. It really makes me want to lean towards Georgia and this one. The problem is Georgia's run D hasn't been great. We just saw Schrader last week run pretty well against them. I don't know if Ole Miss can copy that exact same success in the running style because, like I said, I don't know if they can get outside as well. But Quinshon Judkins is a better running back. Again, not throwing any slander, but Judkins might be one of the best 2 or 3 running backs in all of college football right now. Can he have his way? I'm going to go ahead and take Georgia. I'm going to take Georgia laying the points, but I don't feel good about it. The other 2, I felt really good about laying the points. This one, I'm a lot more on the fence with.
Yeah, the coming down to 10 is makes this game a bit closer. I could realistically, Maddie, I would pick a push because I think a 10-point win for Georgia is like about what it would be. But I'll pick Ole Miss just because. But if I had to take a pick, it would be a push on that one. But let's move into the wildcard games because there's a couple of big wildcard games that we have on the slate here that have some implications in terms of conference standings and even possibly some college football playoff implications, as well as let's move on to the first one. This is a 2:30 Central Time, 3:30 Eastern Time game in Columbia, Missouri. This game's on CBS. Number 13, Tennessee, travels to take on the Missouri Tigers. I will be in attendance for this game. Very excited about that. Big game on the schedule, nationally televised. Matthew, I want to get your thoughts on this one.
Is Luther Burden playing? Where are we at with Luther Burden right now? I legitimately don't know. Like, is he? I know he's a little dinged up. I think he's probably listed as questionable. We don't, college football, like we always say, you don't have to tell us everything that's going on there, which is a little frustrating. Tennessee's been playing better ball lately. They came off that loss against Alabama where Joe Milton really kind of struggled in the second half, but I think they've been playing a little bit better since then. I think last week against Connecticut, they held out some starters just to make sure they were healthy for this little stretch, so they should be kind of fresh. They look good versus Kentucky. I think their offense is figuring it out a little bit, and I do think you can find some success against Missouri throwing the ball, as we saw kind of LSU do. So I think we're in for a shootout if Missouri's receiving weapons are healthy. If Luther Burden can't play, I do get a little bit more worried. I think he opens up a lot of space for Theo Weiss, for Schrader, for Mookie, all these guys. I think he opens up a lot of space. And if he's not healthy or he's not out there, things get condensed. This Tennessee defense has been very good this year, especially up front. I get a little worried about Missouri finding the space they need for their offense if he's not out there.
For sure, and it looked like as of a couple of days ago that this status was still in question. He was wearing the non-contact jersey, everything like that. But again, we're looking at 2 days ago. That's a Wednesday practice. Like, they're probably not going to push him all that much in practice. I would anticipate Luther to be out there. And just him being out there as a presence, Matty, as you mentioned, is like, you have to respect it. No matter if he's hurt or not, like, you have to respect him being out there. And he'll pop off probably for one big play, and they'll be like, "Oh, he's not that hurt." But because as I mentioned, he came back and against Georgia and played nearly the rest of the game on that. I think he just like tweaked an ankle a little bit on that play there. But this is a really interesting game because this is a game going into it where Tennessee's kind of, especially the last 4 years, has like dominated Missouri. Like, they put up 120 some points in the last 2 games against Missouri. Josh Heupel, former Missouri guy, went and took the UCF head coaching job. There's an interesting dynamic there. After Scott Frost left, he takes the Tennessee job. He puts in this offense. It's all about airing it out and throwing the ball all over the place. And now he's kind of had to do something that he is not traditionally used to being able to do. They play good defense. They run the ball really well. Missouri's really good at defending the run, so I'm curious to see how that dynamic comes up against it. Missouri has been good at running the football themselves, and it seems like in times where they should be running the football more, like against Georgia, against LSU, they deviate away from the run. And I get that they've got a lot of playmakers on the outside. They've got a lot of really good wide receiver talent. They got guys that can make things happen with the ball in their hand. But that running the football, when, Maddie, when Missouri had the ball with about 4.5 minutes left and a chance to take the lead on Georgia, they were running the ball pretty well on that drive. And a screen pass into the belly of a defensive lineman is what was the gut punch essentially there. It was over at that point after that turnover. Now Missouri still had a chance to get into it, but at the momentum fully swung in Georgia's favor. But it's one of those things too, is like when it gets down to it, Missouri's deviates away from the run. And I don't think that they can do that in this game. I think they have to. Cody Schrader's been, here's the thing also, is like Cody Schrader's getting like 25, 26 carries a game. And that's a lot for a guy in the SEC, especially in today's game. So they've got to figure something out when it comes to the running game, especially if Luther is not going to be out there, as you mentioned, because they do like to get outside the tackles, those little stretch plays they run a lot of. But I think that's going to be the key for Missouri to run the football.
Yeah, probably. And like Tennessee again has a good defense against the run. So like to me, this game comes down to one, the Luther Burden status, but also which defensive lineman takes over. Darius Robinson there for Missouri, Tyler Barron for Tennessee. I think both guys are kind of similar in how they play with a little bit of power. They're both very good versus the run, can provide some pass rush. Either one of those guys kind of take over this game, I think it gets significantly harder for the opposing offenses. I think what have we settled on here? Tennessee is currently, oh no, I don't have the line in here. So like, I don't know what we're looking at.
I'll grab it real quick.
Yeah. While you do that, I will say Tennessee dropped 66 on Missouri last year. Yeah. It was in Tennessee, but they dropped 66. That's a lot of points. Coaches do say that it's easier to play this offense once you've seen it once, twice, 3 times. So this second go around for Missouri, they should be a little bit better. But man, 66 is a lot. Even reducing that number a little bit, accounting for seeing it a second time or for lesser QB play, I would be a little nervous if things start out not great for that defense and they start having flashbacks, because maybe it's just something about that offensive structure versus what Missouri's doing. They just kind of have their number with the spacing and the tempo. We'll have to see kind of early in the game.
Tennessee 3-point road favorites in this one. They're giving Tennessee 3 points. Vegas is here. It's a tough one for me because Tennessee was always a toss-up game. We talked about this on the Mizzou That 2 podcast. Tennessee was always a toss-up game for Missouri. Like, could they win it? Yeah, I mean that's a possibility, but we will always. I can remember going through the season preview when I had Missouri at like 7-5 or something like that. Tennessee was one of the games where I was like, they'll probably lose that one. Now, once they beat K-State, once they had a really good performance against LSU, expectations kind of shifted a little bit. But I think that this is going to be a pretty. I don't want to. I'm trying to think of the right word, Maddie. It's important. I think is too over. Like I don't. It's an important game. It's crucial, I think, in terms of just like where Missouri ends up between a really good season or a great season. I think this is going to be one here, and the favorite has covered the spread in each of Tennessee's last 6 games, Maddie, as they are a 3-point favorite. Who are you picking in this one?
I'm taking Missouri. Yeah, give me Missouri. Like I said, I think when you get to see this offense a second time, I think it gets easier. And I think it's especially going to be easier when you account for Joe Milton's just complete level of inconsistency. Yeah. Missouri, they're not the most consistent team, but they've been relatively consistent. They've been kind of the same team week in and week out, no matter the level of competition. They're not really playing up or down. They're not playing wildly different. They are what they are. Tennessee is a little bit more volatile. Give me the Tigers, I think, on this one at home, coming off that Georgia game. I don't think there's a letdown. I think if anything, Tennessee will be caught looking ahead to Georgia more so than Missouri coming down from that Georgia game.
Yeah, I think so too. Listen, Missouri played well against Georgia. I don't think they have anything to hang their heads. Like they played a really good game. Georgia's just a really good football team. That's kind of how it ends up. I'm gonna take Mizzou as well, especially at home. I'm gonna give them the home bump. Maybe it's a little bit of a Harrison Mevis little walk-off kick again when it comes down to it. But let's get to
Huskyson Mevis.
Yeah, I like his little strut he does.
Oh yeah. So remember that UCF punter that used to do like the golf celebrations, the thick UCF punter that did the little golf thing? It's not the same, but like just the same level of just like, that's fun.
Yeah. He's a fun kicker. He's been good this year. Last year wasn't so good. This year he's been a little bit better. Last game that we have on the wild card slate before we get into the Sickos game is USC at Oregon. USC dropped out of the top 25, dropped out of the college football playoff rankings. And they traveled to number 6, Oregon. It's a late game, 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern in Eugene. This game will be on Fox. Oregon favored by 16 points. Maddie, how do you see this one going?
What is going on with that line? Washington was a 3-point favorite just last week, wins a 1-score game, and then Oregon is 16-point favorite. Yeah. What? I understand that, like, we think that Oregon's a little bit stronger. They're more consistent than what Washington's been this year. We can ignore how they played against each other or whatever it may be. That's fine. That's fine. It's just, that's a big gap for what we've seen. I think this is probably the like biggest market inefficiency of a line that you can find. Spoiler, I'm taking USC because that's just too many points for an offense that I think is going to be able to put up points against Oregon, just like, I don't know, Washington did. The only good offense Oregon's faced all year put up points. Why all of a sudden is USC not going to? That makes no sense. I don't think this team's quit. If they win this, they are in the Pac-12 championship game if everything else holds. Winning this gives them the tiebreaker over Oregon with the same conference record. Like, they have everything to play for. They got rid of Alex Grinch. I don't know if interim defensive coordinators is giving you the same bump as an interim head coach does, right? How teams like often win their first game under an interim head coach. I don't know if you get that, but I bet the defense at least plays hard, not well, but hard for them. I don't know if they'll stop Oregon a lot, but like, I think they'll be in this game. At 16 points is wild to me. Give me the Trojans on this one. I wouldn't be surprised if they come up with the upset, even at 16-point dogs.
Yeah, it is kind of wild. And maybe the narrative around Oregon's been so interesting to me, Maddie, because they seem to get so much credit for losing to Washington while people bash Washington in the same breath. Because if you look at Oregon's schedule, they haven't beat a team over 500 besides Utah. Utah's the only team that they've beaten with an over 500 record.
They beat the brakes off of them in Rice Eccles, right? So like, I get that was a very good, impressive win. They also played a pig farmer. So like,
I don't necessarily see it, I guess, when it comes to Oregon. They lost to Washington. Like, they lost that football game, but they're getting more credit for losing to Washington than Washington is getting for being undefeated, essentially, at this point.
Yes.
And I know Washington's been a little inconsistent. They've still won the games. You know who else has been inconsistent and is still number 1 in the country? Ohio State. They didn't play very good against Rutgers, but they didn't bash them for being inconsistent. It's a conversation to me where I think Alabama should probably be higher than Oregon.
Yes. So should Texas. Texas.
Texas should be as well.
Oregon's best win is number 18 Utah. And if number 18 Utah loses to Washington, like we have both predicted here, they're going to be out of the top 25. They won't be ranked, and they shouldn't really be in the conversation. Their best win would have been just the USC. I don't know. I don't know what we're doing with Oregon. I get it. They're blowing everybody out, which is impressive. I think that deserves the credit, and they are certainly in the college football playoff race. I think if they play Washington for the title in Las Vegas for the Pac-12, it's probably a pick 'em. But 16 points to a USC team that Washington was just a 3-point favorite in makes no sense to me. I also think not a trap game, because I don't think Dan Lanning and Oregon are overlooking USC, but I think it's hard if you're a player to not look at USC and be like, oh no, this is a game we're definitely going to win from that aspect. And especially USC's defense maybe having a little bit more bite just because of what's going on with no Alec Grinch. This is a USC spot for me every time.
I'll pick the dog as well. Love a hungry dog. Hungry dog runs faster. Is that what they say? I can't remember who said that. Somebody said that somewhere. Let me know who you think said that. But Oregon does have Arizona State and Oregon State left on their schedule.
That sounds like a Nick Saban thing. That sounds like something Nick Saban would say.
You know what? Hungry dog runs fast. Listen, it was auto-filled. Jalen Hurts said that.
Who did?
Jalen Hurts.
You know where he heard that, right?
Yeah.
He heard that from Saban for
He
sure.
heard it from Saban. 100%.
I just want to say real quick, I like Oregon's offensive line. Ajani Cornelius has been very good at right tackle. I do think USC's defensive line as pass rushers is something that they're decent. They're not great, but they're decent. Bear Alexander, I think, has gotten a little extra heat than he should have because everyone expected him to save their defense single-handedly or something. But like Solomon Byrd, Jamil Muhammad, like they have some guys that can get after the passer a little bit there for USC. So like, I don't know if this is going to be like Bo Nix just sitting back there and dicing up the USC secondary, which isn't very good all game long. I expect USC to have a little bit of fight on that side of the ball.
Yeah, it's going to be a good game. It's a late one too, which I always enjoy when they play these Pac-12 games real late, 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern. Maddie, let's wrap up with the Sickos game of the week. Hats tip to the Sickos committee.
Back to the baseball diamond. Let's go.
We're back to the diamond, baby. They did name this one their Sickos game of the week. We've delineated from their picks a couple of times because we thought some games were Sickos, but man, when I saw this game on the ACC network in Yankee Stadium as the Pitt Panthers will take on the Syracuse Orange. Let me say it again. Inside Yankee Stadium, another baseball diamond that we have for the Sickos game of the week. We could not resist putting this one on the Sickos game of the week, Maddie.
I mean, listen, last week Iowa Northwestern ended 10-7 at Wrigley with, I believe, a total yardage well under like 400 total yards. Neither team got 200 total yards. This game was decided by short field goals and a touchdown. This game is going to be amazing. This game is going to follow suit. I think it'll be a little bit higher scoring than the Iowa game, but we are again in Yankee Stadium for another football game. Syracuse, the Pitt Panthers, Narduzzi already coming up with excuses for why his players stink and how they're not good enough. How much he hates real football and NIL and pretty much how he hates everything in life going against Syracuse. I'm here for this, Tuck.
3-point favorite for Pittsburgh. The over-under in this game, 37.5. Hammer the under, and I'm going to take the Qs because I cannot in good conscience pick the Pittsburgh Panthers.
Ride with Dino.
Win a football game. Yeah, the Qs were my team last year, if you remember correctly. They had a little bit of an undefeated run. They had a shot to make it to the ACC title game. I think Sean Tucker might have got hurt. They might have had some quarterback issues. I can't remember how that all went down, but there was a couple of injuries there. But I'm taking Qs in this one. Yankee Stadium, just an insane venue to be playing. Why do we keep playing football games on baseball stadiums?
Well, okay. I got nuggets for you, buddy.
Let's do it.
I got nuggets. Syracuse, is 20-16-2 when playing in other pro venues in the New York, New Jersey area. They're over 500 at 20-16-2. It gets better, Tuck. Don't worry. They are 8-3 playing on baseball fields. That's right. 8-3. They are 7-3 at Yankee Stadium, 1-0 at Shea Stadium. So, like, listen, we're riding with the Qs. They don't lose. They don't lose in Yankee Stadium. Give me the orange. Lock it up.
Locking up the orange here. Syracuse podcast is what we are. No,
I think we're a baseball stadium. I think we're football and baseball diamond podcast.
It sounds. Why do they keep doing this? I know they play like the Fenway Bowl or whatever they call it now. One of the bowl games is in Fenway Park that they have that, and I think they always have one in Yankee Stadium as well. That's like the Pinstripe Bowl.
I'm just waiting for the air carrier football game. We get the basketball game out there. When are we getting the football game out on the high seas?
You know what? That's what they need to do. It's Veterans Day this weekend.
Army, Navy. Definitely have to. We need Army, Navy on an aircraft carrier. Talk about home field advantage for Navy.
Yeah, it's true. I was thinking Army Air Force or Navy Air Force because it's the Navy with the planes.
Yeah, let's put them on. They neither want to throw the ball. Like now they have an excuse not to because they're on the high seas.
True. Shout out the Army Black Knights as well.
No longer playing a game in Ireland. We're playing a game on the way to Ireland.
And then once they get there, they play another game.
Well, Notre Dame's waiting for him, obviously.
Notre Dame is waiting for the winner of that game. Yeah, that's how it works. That's the week 0. Listen, I'm all for it. I think we've just fixed college football with that right there.
That's the final thing. You don't even need to ask me. That's it. That's a sign off right there.
That's it. A couple of comments. Maddie taking the Trojans might be the upset of the week.
Agreed.
Facts.
Soft team, but we're riding with them this week because Grinch is gone.
Ian Mueller says Maddie knows ball.
So. Debatable, but thank you.
That's going to do it.
Yeah, that's it. We're out.
That's going to do it for this week's Barely Bowl Eligible. We'll be back next week talking about probably some more college football stories because this season has been chock full of storylines. From on the field to off the field, everything in between. Hey, maybe we'll get some group of 5 action there. We didn't talk about the Dukes, but the Dukes are rolling in every single sport. You can't stop the Dukes. You can't stop the momentum. Hopefully by next week, we'll have some news to share about the Dukes. That would be great to see the Dukes in a New Year's 6 bowl. That'd be pretty darn sweet. But anyway, I'm Tucker Franklin. That's Maddie Lane. We will talk to you guys next week. Thanks for listening.